Okay, here we go. I think we're live. This is the after show for Rantzerker number 106. We're going to be looking at another short video from the Mark Zuckerberg. I keep wanting to call it a trial, even though he's not really on trial for anything. But the conference, or whatever you want to call it, of Mark Zuckerberg. This one is entitled Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg Tries to Define Hate Speech. It was also put out by 1791L. If you guys don't know who 1791L is, I recommend that you check them out because they make good videos. They used to just put up clips from news, things and so on. And I think they have they're clearly more conservative, but I think it's more of a conservative libertarian kind of bent. So, because I never see anything, I don't know, I guess that you would normally associate it with conservatism, like religion and shit like that. It's mostly about policy. So, anyway, let us listen to this. I forgot who he's talking to at this point. It just wasn't Ted Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Zuckerberg, thanks for being here. At current pace, you're due to be done with first round of questioning by about 1 a.m., so congratulations. I like Chris Coons a lot, with his own family or with Dan Sullivan's family. Both are great photos. But I want to ask a similar set of questions from the other side, maybe. I think the conceptual line between mere tech company, mere tools, and an actual content company, I think it's really hard. I think you guys have a hard challenge. I think regulation over time will have a hard challenge. And you're a private company, so you can make policies that may be...
I'm just going to pause this for a second here. He says... I'm going to go back to the thing where he poses.
I think regulation over time will have a hard challenge. And you're a private... The conceptual line between mere tech company, mere tools, and an actual content company, I think it's really hard.
Right. So the line between a tech company and a content company is what he's getting at. Is really hard. Why do you think the distinction matters between those two things? Anybody have a thought on that?
Well, because if he's making content, he's a publisher. And if he's not, he's a mere tech company.
He's a platform.
And if he's a mere tech, he's a platform. And so if he's a platform and he doesn't gatekeep, he has immunity from responsibility for the things published on his platform. If he's a publisher, he has to take responsibility for that. Legally, criminally, and civilly, he has to take responsibility for the things published on his platform if he's a publisher. So if he gatekeeps too much, then... yeah, he's on the hook for all of that. That's him expressing his views, not him allowing other people a platform to express their views.
Got it. All right. If any of you other guys want to comment on anything that is said here, just start talking and I'll pause it, okay?
I think you guys have a hard challenge. I think regulation over time will have a hard challenge. And you're a private company, so you can make policies that may be less than First Amendment full spirit embracing, in my view. But I worry about that. I worry about a world where when you go from violent groups to hate speech in a hurry, in one of your responses to one of the opening questions, you may decide, or Facebook may decide, it needs to police a whole bunch of speech that I think America might be better off not having policed by one company that has a really big and powerful platform. Can you define hate speech?
Senator, I think that this is a really hard question, and I think it's one of the reasons why we struggle with it. There are certain definitions that we have around.
Okay, so before I let Zuckerberg try to answer this question, what do you guys think the answer to that question is? How do you define hate speech?
I think the definition of hate speech is irrelevant, because I don't think that a neutral platform should be in the position to decide what is and what isn't hate speech, right? So it really doesn't matter what it is, like, and particularly in the U.S., there is a concept in law, of, sort of, not a concept in law, but like the legal system has actually addressed hate speech and attempted to define it, but the Constitution will not allow even hate speech to be abridged. So there's no prohibition under the First Amendment of hate speech. You can say whatever the fuck you want about how much you hate certain people or certain groups or a certain person or whatever, as long as you're not inciting direct action, violence, things like that. You know, you're not in violation of the First Amendment. So,
you know, I've been thinking about the inciting violence thing. Because I know that there are two things that often come up, and I'm just sort of toying with these thoughts at this time. One is inciting violence shouldn't be acceptable. The other one is yelling fire in a crowded theater or something along those lines. Essentially causing a panic that could get people hurt. And
imminent harm.
Yeah, imminent harm. Yeah, but I'm trying to look at this as a person who ultimately I'm a free speech absolutist. Like I don't think there should be any limits at all. I think that even if you incite violence, the person that should be ultimately responsible for any violence that happens are the people who actually do physical violence. So just because somebody says kick those guys' asses or kill those people, the people who actually, for whatever reason, decide to listen and go hurt somebody else are the ones that should ultimately be held responsible, in my opinion. When somebody yells fire in a crowded theater, and people get trampled as a result, I don't think it's the guy who yelled fire's fault. That people did not know, you know, they didn't realize that when there is a fire, there's a certain kind of behavior that you're supposed to engage in so that everyone gets out safely, that we've been learning since elementary school. Or what if there is a case where there is a fire, like a real fire, and someone yells fire and someone gets trampled? Is that person still responsible? What if nobody yells fire, but a fire alarm goes off because someone pulled it and people get trampled? Or it goes off because there's actually smoke? You know, like there's all these other, because these two examples get thrown out a lot. And I'm thinking about them, and I just don't see. Even then, I think that you can make the argument that those are still free speech, because the saying, you know, just because someone says do something, they don't have psychic powers over other people. That no one has to do what they're saying.
If all your friends said it was a good idea to jump off a cliff, would you jump off a cliff?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I think.
That's my best impression of a Jewish mother.
Now, tell me if I'm wrong, but I mean, that's where I stand on it. Like, I know that and these are like these kind of extenuating circumstances where somebody says, there shouldn't be any such thing as free speech because fire in a crowded theater or because incitement of violence. Those things are not going to happen often enough to undermine the entire idea of freedom of speech. And on top of that, I can find ways to argue out of that, which are those examples I just gave. You know, like, yeah, here's to go with the inciting violence thing. Okay, did Hitler ever kill anyone? Now we look at him as though he's like the greatest villain in the 20th century, if not all of recent history, because he's the most recent bad guy that we can think of, right? But Hitler himself, did he actually kill anyone ever? Or did all the people who listened to him kill people? And how come we don't know their names? Or what, you know, like we're not holding them as responsible. Let's put it that way. It's because I think we have this idea that we defer too much responsibility and power on the people who I guess we look at as our leaders, but we never have to listen to them. It's like, I'm going to give another example. I get into Second Amendment arguments with people online. One guy made the argument that, you know, as someone else, not me, but someone else is making the argument that, you know, we need our Second Amendment rights to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government. And of course, the common counter argument that I hear from people on the left is if the government was going to go after you, you wouldn't be able to stop them because they have tanks and armies and drones and all that, right? And you just have your AR-15. But I had to butt in and say, but you're working under the assumption that every soldier underneath the government in the military would turn its guns on its own people. And those people are not drones. Soldiers don't do whatever they're told no matter what. You know, you have to like make the case. Besides, what kind of political beliefs do most soldiers in the military have? Where do they sit politically? Are they pro Second Amendment? Yeah, I bet. Most of them are. So, you know, this, I'm just spitballing. It's not entirely related, but I think that for me, there's no such thing as hate speech. It's not even a conversation that has to happen, in my opinion. I don't care what people say. I don't think there's such a thing. Now, there is speech that is hateful, but I don't think that it's something that you can put a label on and then say, now we have to regulate this. I don't agree with that at all. I think that speech should be free, full stop, period. That's my opinion.
Just so you know, to me, the whole reason for government propaganda and otherizing groups is what's necessary to get soldiers to kill other people in their neighbors and stuff like that.
In their own government or in their own country domestically.
Yes.
Yeah. Sure, they would use that if they could, but do you think that the argument?
And that's why having a bigger country is dangerous, because you can send soldiers from one side of the country to the other side, and they don't have any links, so they can shoot them with impunity.
So, do you think that the idea of the Second Amendment used to protect people from a tyrannical government is less valid because of that? Because that's the argument the left has, right? They just send tanks and drones. I mean, what are you going to do against that? You know, and of course, another argument I could make is that. So basically, what you're saying is, since they're out,
I think the Second Amendment is great and is here to protect the people from the government.
Mm-hmm.
And you exercise it when you exercise it, it's to overthrow the tyranny. And I think the more armed the people is, the less the government can be tyrannical, at least overtly.
Yes.
It will need to do more propaganda. And
yeah, because the anti-gun argument,
attacks.
the anti-gun argument in the context of what I was saying is something. It sounds something like this. It's like because your guns are not good enough, and it only gives you, like, you know, you have a 90% chance of getting killed by the superior government. You might as well just give them up so that they have a 100% chance of killing you instead. so yeah. All right.
The argument that I constantly hear is Trump is a Nazi. Also
give him all. Yeah. Also give him all your guns.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hear that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right. So anyway, hate speech. We're moving on.
Calling for violence or.
No.
Let's just agree on that. If somebody's calling for violence, that shouldn't be there. I'm worried about the psychological categories around speech. You used language of safety and protection earlier. We see this happening on college campuses all across the country. It's dangerous. 40% of Americans under age 35 tell pollsters they think the First Amendment is dangerous because you might use your freedom to say something that hurts somebody else's feelings. Guess what? There are some really passionately held views about the abortion issue on this panel today. Can you imagine a world where you might decide that pro-lifers are prohibited from speaking about their abortion views on your content, on your platform?
Good question.
He should have, actually, the question would have been better if he'd said, can you imagine a universe in which pro-choicer speech would be censored on your platform?
Yeah, I would have flipped it too. Because because the thing is, I think that it really puts, it's like what Jordan Peterson said, when you are talking about things like, limiting speech, the best way to decide whether or not it's a good idea is to imagine what speech would look like if the people you least want to have control over speech have control over speech. It's you have to look at the worst possible outcome not in your favor. Then you know whether or not you want it to be free. Because that will happen. It will happen.
Yeah, no, the only reason why the left doesn't care about free speech right now or wants to suppress it is because they have a stranglehold on the discourse. right? They have power over the discourse, and you can say in the United States, oh well, the majority. You can say, it's pretty even in the government, right? In terms of elected office and Congress and the Senate and all of that, and there's a Republican in the White House. But when it comes to speech platforms, media, education, all of those things, and the bureaucracy, the deep state, right? Which is not a tinfoil hat thing. It's not like that. I think that the deep state is some kind of conspiracy of like.
No, it's the military-industrial complex, isn't it?
Well, no, the deep state is, you cannot fire the entire government and rehire all those positions every time the government changes hands. You can't do it. Right? So the deep state is not necessarily, it's the FBI, it's the CIA, it's the bureaucracy, it is child protective services, it is the family courts, it is.
That's why you don't create those agencies in the first place.
Well, okay, yes, Remy. In an ideal world, we wouldn't create them in the first place. But okay,
not in an ideal world.
But okay, those are the things that you can't just say, okay, everybody who's in the CIA, everybody who's in the FBI, everybody who's in every police agency, everybody who's in every child protective services agency in every state in the United States, when a Republican comes in, we're going to fire you all and open up the jobs, right? Like the government is more than the people we elect, right? And the government, the portion of the government that is more than the people we elect are they outnumber the people we elect by probably, like, I don't know, 18,000 to 1. Okay, and they can't be just recycled every election season and we'll bring in a whole new staff. No. And a whole new set of policies in every single government department. No, that's not what happens, right? And so what you're looking at is, even though we have a Republican in the White House and we have strong Republican representation in the Congress and the Senate, right? What we don't have is strong Republican anything in those parts of the government that don't get recycled, that don't have term limits, right? Lifetime bureaucrats.
Yeah. Essentially royalty, right?
Well, it's not loyalty to a person or anything. It's
royalty.
Loyalty to a set. Oh, royalty, yeah.
Yes.
And they have way more power than a lot of people are willing to believe, right? Because policy, I talk about law all the time. I talk about policy all the time, and I all the time I say policy is the worst thing, because policy, like the Dear Colleague letter, that wasn't law, that was policy. Right?
Yeah.
It was policy that was, handed down from on high by fiat, by a hand-picked bureaucrat that was not elected. It wasn't submitted for constitutional scrutiny. It didn't have any kind of public debate around it. It was just, universities are going to do this now. Right? That's all it was. And it had the full backing of the government behind it. Right. So literally you had this one woman, Ruslan Ali, in the Office of Civil Rights of the Department of Education saying, this is my word. My word is now law for you. And I didn't have to run it past anybody.
Yep. Okay. Continuing on.
I certainly would not want that to be the case.
But it might really be unsettling to people who've had an abortion to have an open debate about that, wouldn't it?
It might be, but I don't think that would fit any of the definitions of what we have. But I do generally agree with the point that you're making, which is as we're able to technologically shift towards, especially having AI proactively look at content, I think that's going to create massive questions for society about what obligations we want to require companies to fulfill. And I do think that that's a question that we need to struggle with as a country, because I know other countries are, and they're putting laws in place. And I think that America needs to figure out and create the set of principles that we want American companies to operate under.
Karen, what I meant to ask you this while we were doing the other show, the previous one. I meant to ask you, and I totally forgot, is if there was a question that you think Senator Cruz should have asked Mark Zuckerberg that he didn't, about, you know, what he was talking about, like the censorship of what appeared to be the censorship of conservative and libertarian voices on social media. Or do you think that he pretty much got it? He pretty much said everything you would have said.
I think he pretty much nailed everything, if not directly, then by implication. Essentially, just, you know, like, has anybody been fired? You know, like maybe that, but like, has anybody been fired?
Yeah, he asked about what's his name, the VR guy, but he didn't. He didn't say, has anyone lost their job for their political views. And I bet, because Remy is over there right now, right? Aren't you over there under the leftist boot? I mean, do people get fired for their politics? Do you have to you have to stay in the closet about your Ancapitism?
Not as far as I know, except I don't talk publicly about that. At least under the name of Apple.
But it's no, essentially, no, I think not has anybody been fired for their political views. That's not what I would have asked.
Oh, okay.
Was anybody fired for hand tweaking the trending tabs, right? On Facebook? Was anybody fired for actually, you know, going in and removing conservative stuff from the trending stuff on Facebook? Was anybody fired over that?
Yeah.
Right? Because that, in my opinion, if I was a guy running a platform that depended on at least the appearance of neutrality, right? Any person under my watch who does something like that, who goes through the trending fucking list and just is like, oh, Crowder out, Gavin McInnes out, oh, hey, this guy out, Rebel Media out, right? Fox News out, all the trending stuff. Oh, back to 100% liberal. Excellent. Okay. Anybody who actually did that, okay, would be jeopardizing my company's immunity under law.
Yeah.
And he would go, not necessarily even if I thought what he did was 100% like totally what I would do if I had the freedom to, you know, run the world, right? Okay. But you're literally endangering the company's immunity status by doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been a good one to ask for sure. Okay.
Thanks. I wouldn't want you to leave here today and think there's sort of a unified view in the Congress that you should be moving toward policing more and more and more speech. I think violence has no place on your platform. Sex traffickers and human traffickers have no place on your platform.
Although, you can find Facebook videos, and I've seen it many times, Facebook videos and images, but mainly videos that get shared that are really violent. Like, I think someone was sharing a beheading video, like an ISIS beheading video was circulating on Facebook. And I came across it. I've also seen videos of animals being harmed, whether purposefully or not. There was just one yesterday. I don't know if it qualifies as really violent, but there was one yesterday that Now This, I think, was sharing. Or no, it was Lad Bible, I believe. And it was of a giraffe that was, these people were driving, maybe it was a safari or something, but they were in a car, in a Jeep of some kind, and a giraffe put its head in the window on the driver's side. Or maybe it was the passenger side. And the window raised itself while the giraffe's head was in there and shattered. Like it pressed up against the giraffe's head and broke. And the Lad Bible was trying to paint the narrative that the woman raised the window on purpose to harm the giraffe and that it was like this terrible thing. But in actual fact, it seemed to me, because Lindsay showed it to me, she was like, how fucked up is this? And I watched it, and I was like, I don't think that woman is doing that. I think the giraffe might be doing that without knowing. Because my dog, when I drive him around, he'll sometimes he would stand on the, you know, unknowingly to have his head out the window, and he would have one of his paws on the controls. And then the window would go up, and he didn't know. And I had to like go and save him. So I don't think that happened. But the point is, there is violent content that I have come across on Facebook.
And I think there should be. I mean, how would you report on a war situation or something like this? If there's that was another video that was going around. It was like there were these soldiers. I think they were in Africa or the Middle East, and it was a camera on the helmet, and they were these American soldiers, and they got ambushed by some other, you know, army, and they all died. Like the guy with who the cameras, it was on his head, the person whose eyes you were seeing all this through, he dies in the video. You see him at the end, he falls over and there's blood. I thought, holy shit. And this is not like, you know, this was a real thing, and that was actually going around too. And sure, I mean, they give you a warning, which I think is probably the best way forward, that says, you know, must be over 18 to view this content, click to continue or whatever. And that I think that there's definitely stuff like that around. And I guess it kind of like brings up another question that I meant to ask while we were live and I didn't. Facebook currently has definitely has limits on things like nudity and sex. And some obvious stuff like, you know, child porn or whatever. But if you were going to be like the free speech platform to end all free speech platforms, would you not have to allow for that content as well? And if you did, then how would you control for the fact that so many young people use the platform? And I mean, you know, if you're trying to make sure that little kids don't end up, you know, coming across porn or something like that. It's just some stuff I'm thinking about. Like, you know, it's like, it is your platform, but I wonder how that factors in, period. Just curious.
Are you asking me to explain how I would deal with a hypothetical platform that allowed child porn?
No. I wouldn't include that. I think that because that's harmful to kids.
I would actually include some things. I would actually allow for some things that are in Canada at least defined as child porn, which is written text.
Yeah.
Fiction, like written fiction.
Oh. Lolicon.
Drawn stuff, like animated stuff like that. I would probably allow that.
Well, what's the freest free speech space on all of the internet? Is it 4chan?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Except during the brief period of the Zoe Quinn Five Guys Burgers and Fries controversy.
I don't know.
But actual depictions of children being sexually abused, that like, and the reason why I would actually allow the other stuff is because of the evidence that I've seen that as porn has become more accessible in general, rape has gone down, right? And it's been almost like the lines on the graph are almost 100% in line with each other, right? So I would think that maybe allowing certain people to access that might,
be good for society in the long run.
Well, yeah, no, and well, it might not be harmful.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's what I mean. It would make it won't make things worse.
Yeah, and a lot of the anti-porn activists rely on Ted Bundy's final interview, where he blamed porn for everything he did, and it's like, well, of course he blamed something other than himself for everything he did. you know, because that's something other than himself that he can blame. But I don't know that porn, you know, like Andrea Dworkin made the argument that porn trains men to rape, and, you know, she can't even prove correlation.
Yeah.
Let alone causation. And so it's like, okay, so maybe allowing people who are, and I do think pedophilia is one of those things that is not, it's not something that people can be talked out of.
No.
Right?
No.
And so if you can't talk them out of it, maybe just give them something.
An outlet that's not harmful, basically.
Yeah. So I mean,
while you know, maybe getting them help or something, but that would have to be by their choice, right?
Oh, and the getting them help thing too, right? That's one of the things that I really get upset about with the whole discourse on pedophilia is that, and not just the discourse, but the legalities and the policies and all of that around pedophilia is that if I were a person who went and said to my therapist, okay, I'm attracted to young kids and I'm worried that I'm going to offend, right? That therapist has legal license, not just a legal license, but a legal obligation to violate patient therapist or patient psychiatrist confidentiality and report me to police. Okay, which just opens up a fucking nightmare for me. So why would I disclose that?
So yeah, then why you won't disclose
why would I
keep
ask
it to yourself.
For help?
Yeah.
Yeah, why would I ask for help?
Which increases the odds that you might act on it because you don't have someone to talk to about it who is supposed to be there to help you.
That's right. And so essentially, like, you know, like, and I'm not saying, you know, I support pedophiles. My position is I don't support people who touch kids, and I don't support anybody who sexually abuses children, right? And I think that they need to go away because once you've crossed the line and offended, really that's the line you've crossed. Now you're in this room. You know, but we could do different things, or we could maybe do things differently in, you know, in such a way as to prevent people from crossing that line in the first place. And what we're doing right now in terms of people who disclose to their therapist or whoever that they have certain urges, they're not given any outlet. They have no accessible outlet, even text, right? And they are not given a confidant who's not going to betray them. So, you know, a confidant who helps them, who essentially is, you know, going to help them not offend. So even the people, even the sort of there are apparently pedophiles out there who are, they call themselves not virtuous. Maybe they call themselves virtuous, or other people labeled them virtuous pedophiles, but they have made a commitment to never offend.
Yeah.
Despite their feelings, and yet we make it as difficult as possible for those people to get support and all of that to help them not offend. So it's, you know, like I think that honestly, but actual child porn should never be allowed anymore.
No. Well, actual child porn is actually hurting kids.
Yeah, no, and anybody who fucking makes that, who makes that needs to like go away for a long fucking time.
Yeah, lock them up and throw away the key. Exactly.
Yeah, and you better put them in solitary because they're gonna get fucking ass raped. So,
and shanked. They're gonna get penetrated in multiple ways. All right, so let us continue this video. We went on a little bit of a tangent. I was just wondering about what the limits on, you know, because I guess I was asking because Facebook is not currently an absolute bastion of free speech anyway.
No, it's not.
Because it's not outside of the ideological stuff, which is the stuff where people really take issue, but like the things like, you know, violence and nudity and sexuality and, you know, that kind of thing. They don't, it's already not free. So
But vigorous debates, adults need to engage in vigorous debates. I have only a little less than 2 minutes left, so I want to shift gears a little bit. But that was about adults. You're a dad. I'd like to talk a little bit about social media addiction. You started your comments today by talking about how Facebook is and was founded as an optimistic company. You and I have had conversations separate from here. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think as you've aged, you might be a little bit less idealistic and optimistic than you were when you started Facebook. As a dad, do you worry about social media addiction as a problem for America's teens?
Well, my hope is that we can be idealistic but have a broad view of our responsibility. To your point about teens, this is certainly something that I think any parent thinks about, is how much do you want your kids using technology? At Facebook specifically, I view our responsibility as not just building services that people like, but building services that are good for people and good for society as well. So we study a lot of effects of well-being of our tools and broader technology. And like any tool, there are good and bad uses of it. What we find in general is that if you're using social media in order to build relationships, right? So you're sharing content with friends, you're interacting, then that is associated with all of the long-term measures of well-being that you would intuitively think of. Long-term health, long-term happiness, long-term feeling connected, feeling less lonely. But if you're using the internet and social media primarily to just passively consume content and you're not engaging with other people, then it doesn't have those positive effects and it could be negative.
We're almost at time, so I want to ask you one more. Do social
I don't think I need a banana at this thing, but I paused it anyways.
Yeah, okay. Well, banana.
Yeah.
Social media companies hire consulting firms to help them figure out how to get more dopamine feedback loops so that people don't want to leave the platform?
No, Senator. That's not how we talk about this or how we set up our product teams. We want our products to be valuable to people, and if they're valuable, then people will choose to use them.
Are you?
Do you guys buy that?
I think he's looked at the research. I think that, and even if you haven't looked at the research, you can understand, right? Like,
to me, it's irrelevant.
Casinos knew how to operate even before there was anybody had ever heard of dopamine or anything like that, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, they observe human behavior, they observe what keeps people on the platform, right? And they offer those things. World of Warcraft was like absolutely 100% like they were the kings of harnessing the dopamine cycle. Particularly among men and boys, right? You have challenges, it's difficult, it's and then you have rewards and level ups and all of this stuff, right? I mean, like very interactive and very plastic in terms of what you can do. You can go and do what you want and still level up and all of those things, right? They were, so the idea that you need research, that you need actual research on actual dopamine levels in the brain and stuff like that to be able to create something that triggers all of those effects is ridiculous. You don't need that. Casinos have been doing it for decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remy, what was that you said earlier?
I think it's irrelevant.
Yeah, irrelevant.
To me, it doesn't matter if it's actually you going to, as long as the people are glad to do it, they should be able to. Why would you want to make those people more miserable by removing their fix?
Mm-hmm. Are you aware of other social media companies that do hire such consultants?
Not sitting here today.
Thanks.
All right.
That's the end of the video. I guess.
Oh my God.
I know Karen's really tired, so we should.
I'm gonna kill my child. I'm gonna kill my child. He's like, "Can you come pick me up?" No, I can't.
Read the article I posted on.
Sorry?
Read the article I posted earlier on robber barons.
Okay.
Okay, I will. But I'm going to have a nap. I had to be up for a talk radio show at 7 this morning. I had to be coherent and succinct for a talk radio show at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And so I'm like tired and I'm going to nap. So.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, we're going to go ahead and close this out then. I want to thank you guys for joining us on the after show. I'm going to go ahead and end the after